Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ballasted Union Pacific Railroad Evanston Subdivision in HO Scale. My name is Darrell Cruz, owner, builder, and ballaster of the railroad, and your host for episode 16 of season 2023. Yes, I did get some ballast down on the railroad. Not always my favorite thing to do. But I was very happy with the results, and actually was very happy to find out that ballasting in HO is a lot easier than N scale. So I actually kind of enjoyed it. I used this tool here, forgot what the name of it is, but it had a little dispensers for the middle and the ends. It was a little bit sloppy as far as going back and forth. It didn't really hold tight to the rails. I'm sure that's so it could go around curves. I ended up putting some styrene on the slots to limit that slop a little bit so that it was in the middle exactly the whole time. But here you just kind of fill it up. You don't have to have it on the track when you fill it up, by the way. Not sure why I did it that way. But actually it works out pretty cool. You just kind of hold it in place, open the gates, and then as consistently as possible move it down the rails. And as you can see, it does dispense the ballast pretty good. It looks like a good profile there. It covered about 15 inches, as you can see. Once I got it down, as you can see, there's a little bit of excess ballast on top of the ties. So the first thing I do is use my finger to kind of spread that out a little bit. I'm kind of not only moving it back and forth, but I'm also kind of getting it to go over the rails to the outside of the rail so that it kind of removes some of the excess ballast from the middle, which you generally have to do. And then now what I'm doing is using my fingernail to clear the ballast off of the rails. You definitely don't want any ballast on the rails themselves. It will interfere with the operation of your rolling stock, and it just doesn't look good to have a rock that's somehow magically stuck to the middle of a rail. So I use my fingernail there, and then right now I'm using my finger, not my fingernail, but my finger then to push the excess ballast into the middle. So my fingernail here to get it off the rails, and then my finger to push the ballast towards the middle. Generally, if I was working on regular ties, I would keep trying to remove that ballast from the middle. But since I was doing concrete ties here, I decided to leave that there because that's the way the ballast is. On the prototype, the shape of the concrete ties is shallower in the middle than it is where the rails attached to the ties. So when you see concrete ties ballasted, there's usually the excess ballast down the middle of the track. So I wanted to kind of keep that effect here. Now as you can see, I'm removing the ballast from the rails on the outside of the rails, and then using my finger to push it off of the ties. So it looks pretty good. I try. One thing I try to do, well, I should say I try to do this time, is not to be too exacting about it and try to get it perfect. When I did my Geneva sub in N scale, I did not enjoy ballasting at all, and part of it was because I was just too trying to be too perfect, and it kept going over and over and over it again to get it just exactly. And I tell you what, N scale is a lot harder. The ballast is finer, and so you have a lot more difficulty from that standpoint. And then it's just a lot smaller, so it's just a lot tougher. This is Woodland Scenic's ballast, so it's actually not real rock. It's, I think, made of crushed walnuts. Here you can see how it looks. I think it looks pretty good. And here's the entire done. And you can see now my next step after getting it on there is to put some water on it so I can add glue. You cannot put glue directly onto the ballast. It will beat up like crazy and will look terrible. So you have to put some water on it first, get it soaking wet with water, and then the glue will go into it without disturbing it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm kind of making it rain. You don't want to start by spraying directly to the rails. So you get a good sprayer, not a cheap one from Walmart, but a good one, and just make it rain. So you actually are shooting up and letting the rain fall on the ballast, and then once it's initially wet, then you can start spraying directly onto the ballast. And I basically start with it raining, then I spray from this standpoint, and then I just kind of get closer and closer. I'm not done getting it wet right there. I actually will spend a lot of time and get the nozzle closer and closer until it's really soaking wet. And then I use a dispenser like this. I did get a chance to videotape, but you can kind of see I use this little dispenser with a little hole there, and don't just pour it on. You have to have something that will enable you to dribble it on there. And I use a 50-50 mix of white glue and water. And then I use that little cap there to dribble it on there. I make 5 passes with it. One down the middle of the track for between the rails, and then once on each of the ties outside the rails, so that's 3. And then I make another pass on the embankments on both sides. So at least 5 passes, sometimes more. Just want to make sure I get it nice and soaking wet with the glue. Now, generally then you may have to come back if the glue did wash some of it away, which it did in different spots, which is okay. It actually is kind of gives a natural effect of the ballast on both sides of the track that's kind of spills over. So you have the embankment part of the ballast, but then it kind of spreads out. And when I did this layout, I measured using Google Earth, and I measured to make sure I had the correct width of the roadbed. So it's 4 inches it came out to. And then, so you have some roadbed on both sides of the track. So eventually I'm going to maybe add even more ballast on both sides so it's completely covered. For what I can tell from the satellite photographs, it's have ballast all the way to the edges of the roadbed, and then you have the profile of the actual track and ballast. But this is how it looked when I was finished. Now this is wet right now, and it takes a long time. I'm going to have to do inside the tunnels here yet. But it takes a long time for the ballast to dry. It's been about almost 30 hours, and it's dry to the touch. Here you can see the look of the ballast that I was talking about, with the ballast on concrete ties in the middle of the track. You can kind of see how that looks. And then here you have a curve where you can see along the concrete ties here, there's a lot of ballast in between the rails. So, and that kind of goes back to not always trying to get it exactly perfect. It's a lot more enjoyable if you just, don't worry about it being exactly perfect. But definitely like the way this looks. I may add some more on the sides to kind of cover the entire roadbed. But I like the fact that I used the flex bed from Hobby Innovations to have a little bit higher profile of the ballast in the track, which is comparable to what you have on the Evanston Sub out in the mountains. So I was real happy with the way this turned out. Here you can see the difference between the regular ties and the concrete ties as far as how the ballast lays. One thing about using regular just white glue is that it sometimes the ties are a little bit shiny. So you have to use some matte clear spray to kind of dull it down a little bit. You can use, instead of white glue, you can use matte medium, which you can get from Hobby Lobby, but it's a little bit more expensive. I just use cheap school glue. And a lot of people don't like to use the school glue either because it's washable. But I actually kind of like the fact that it is water soluble. So in case I do want to make changes, all it takes is getting the ballast soaking wet, and then you can make any minor adjustments that you need to. Here we have a oil train or ethanol tank train moving through on the ballast. I was able to get the track dry enough today so that I could clean it off. It still is a little bit wet, and it's dry to the touch, but I know it's still wet because it's being picked up on the detectors, so it always looks occupied. When it's wet, it conducts a little bit of electricity and shows the track or the block is being occupied. So I know it's completely dry when it no longer detects. So definitely looks a lot better with the ballast, I believe. When I'm out in Wyoming and Utah this summer, I am going to take some pictures and get a little bit more of an idea of how the ballast covers the entire roadbed, and maybe add some more to kind of get that look. By the way, you do hear the basketball game in the background. Sorry about that. I was watching the Warriors and Kings on TV while I was videotaping this. All right, so what needs to be added yet? I still want to put some static grass in to finish this all off. You get a good look at the profile of the roadbed and the ballast and track. Definitely, I think, gives a good representation of Class 1 mainline railroad track. So anyway, more static grass, some roads need to go in. I think I'm going to do a different color on the maintenance roads, by the way. There's a trailer house that goes in this little valley here that I'm going to put in yet. I want to add some scale trees. So a little bit more work to do here, and looking forward to doing that, but things are looking good. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Make sure you continue to follow everything, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend and a great week. Take care, everybody.